Hello and welcome to Heartbeat. This week I sit down for a fascinating conversation with the President of the Bishops' Conference of Scotland, Bishop John Keenan. William will bring us a roundup of news from home and abroad, and Catherine gives us her viewpoint on the UK's return to backstreet abortions. Bishop John Keenan is the Bishop of Paisley and the President of the Bishops' Conference of Scotland. He graduated from the University of Glasgow with a first-class honours degree in law. Then he subsequently studied at the Scots College in Rome and was ordained by Cardinal Thomas Winning in 1995. He was ordained a bishop in 2014 and he was elected President of the Bishops' Conference of Scotland in 2014. And Bishop John joins me now. Bishop John, thank you very much for joining me on SPUCTV. I wanted to start by asking, how concerned, how worried are you by the moves that we're seeing both north and south of the border towards enacting assisted suicide legislation? Some of the concerns that have come out of that, one of the ones that's been raised is, certainly in the Scottish context, there will not be any conscientious protection for a medical practitioner who doesn't want any involvement with this. They'll still be, to some degree, complicit because they'll have to refer people on. How concerned are you about that?
Well, I'm concerned, and the Scottish bishops are concerned about a number of matters. We were concerned when, let's say, the Scottish Liam MacArthur bill, we were concerned when that first came in, but we're even more concerned now that we've seen which amendments the Health Committee have accepted and rejected. So, number one, that there's no time limit for, terminations of life. There's no time limit for that, which means that in England, the law at least purports to say that you have to have a diagnosis of 6 months of life expectancy. That's notably not in the Scottish proposals, which means that someone could be born with a life-limiting condition. So to qualify also means that people with eating disorders can qualify, people with mental conditions can qualify, people with all sorts of disabilities can qualify. So now what the MacArthur bill had been saying initially is that this was for people at the very end of their lives who were in intolerable pain, and to prevent them living those last days in intolerable suffering, then surely we should allow this. But in fact, now this can be for anyone years away from death. That's number one. Number two, the bill has no mention of intolerable suffering, no mention of suffering at all. So suffering is no longer a criterion in terms of the bill. You don't have to be suffering. Your suffering doesn't have to be intolerable. There's no opt-out. So places like the Little Sisters of the Poor, I have Little Sisters of the Poor in Greenock. It's the Little Sisters of the Poor in Glasgow. There's the Nazareth houses also. So Catholic care homes, in terms of the bill, will be required to provide assisted suicide in their care homes. And if they don't, they will either be defunded or have to close. Also, after the amendments, it's now possible for medical practitioners to raise the issue with anyone who goes to. So imagine someone goes along. Imagine my mum goes along to the GP. She's 86 now. She goes along to the GP. I don't know if she goes in for that appointment. I don't know if the GP is going to say to her, listen, Mrs. Keenan, you're slowing down a little bit, Have you ever thought about assisted suicide? So also down south, the Baroness Finlay and Baroness Gray Thompson, they've been concerned, and the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, they've been concerned that the bill is full of holes in terms of coercion. So you've got We don't, and it's already been seen. We can't tell if someone's been coerced. It's virtually impossible to tell if someone is.
When you combine that with a lot of older people have this deep fear that they don't want to be a burden, and they are, in effect, almost ripe for coercion because people are pushing them along and they feel, I don't want anyone else, to cause trouble for anyone else. You can see how easy it would be for that door to be open. And we've seen it in other cases. In Canada, there have been examples of exactly the type you're talking about. Not even people who are very old, but people with disabilities, for example, former veterans in the Canadian military have been told that rather than get support from the state to cope with their disabilities, why not think about assisted suicide? So it happens, and it is happening.
It does. The burden issue is a big thing, isn't it? And again, after the Health Committee looked at the amendments, they refused an amendment that said that it shouldn't be available for those who feel a burden. Now, just let's work this out. I mean, it's obvious. It's as obvious, I think, as the nose in your face. Someone gets to a certain age, they know that they've got children and grandchildren, and they've got a certain amount of inheritance, whatever it would be, and they're saying, well, I now need to go into a care home. That's about £1,000 a week that's going to be eating into the inheritance. And so I don't want to do that. I want to leave the children something. The pressure on them to do that, I think, is now going to be inordinate. Now, if this bill doesn't pass, we're not putting them in that dilemma because they don't have that choice. So, but you mentioned about conscience. Conscience is one of the fundamental aspects of human dignity that we're able to, and we have this in human rights legislation. No one should be required to act against their conscience, and no one should be prevented from acting according to their conscience. Now, that's a fundamental human right, because what are fundamental human rights? They are those which are so close to our dignity that to be deprived of them means that we're deprived of our own personal dignity, and actually the collective dignity of humanity and the common good is diminished as well. So it used to be the case that conscience was so respected that legislation gave every benefit of the doubt to the conscientious objector. Now what's happened is the other way. It's almost as though conscientious objection is something that the state concedes to you, but only in very exceptional circumstances.
It's something that I think has changed in the culture, partly through the way political parties have dealt with that. It used to be that members of Parliament were allowed to take a conscientious position on a range of issues. The obvious ones were things like abortion, things like assisted suicide. Increasingly, though, parties aren't allowing that. They're asking, or they're vetting their candidates in advance of elections and asking them to sign up for a whole range of issues that previously would be seen as conscience matters. So the parties have contributed to this change.
And what it means, in effect, is now I could be, let's say, a Catholic GP, but it wouldn't need to be a Christian GP, or so many healthcare workers who just think assisted suicide is wrong, and they in conscience can't be part of it. So again, someone goes to their GP and says, I've heard about assisted suicide. It's something I would like to, in fact, it's something I want to do. Now, the GP might have a conscientious objection against it, but he's now got to knock on the door of his colleague and say, there's someone here who wants assisted suicide. Well, I would have thought, if I've got a conscientious objection of doing something, I've also got a conscientious objection against facilitating it taking place. So that used to, again, always be a part of conscientious objection. Not only do I not want to be involved, but I don't want to be any part of it.
Mm-hmm. And there's some evidence from, certainly amongst palliative care experts, that if their conscience isn't protected and they are forced to do exactly what you've said, they'd prefer to leave the medical profession than do that. So we could actually see a real damage to that whole sector being done by this legislation. And then on top of that, there will be the economic imperative where government's NHS budgets are always stretched, funding is always tight, and if it becomes clearer and clearer that you could reduce funding by not providing longer-term care, there'll be a lot of pressure to do that as well. So the idea that proponents of this legislation say that you'll always have the choice between assisted dying or palliative care isn't necessarily true. The palliative care sector could be severely damaged by this.
I think that's right. I think it's important for us to know that, particularly elected representatives, to know that, first of all, the choice, I think, is a binary choice in the mind of an MSP or an MP. You either say, I'm voting for the autonomy of some to end their lives, or I'm voting to protect the vulnerable. I cannot do both. It's not possible to do both. I can't vote for a small group of those who want to express their autonomy and at the same time protect the disabled, those who could be coerced, the mentally impaired. I can't do both. So as an MP, you have to say, what's foremost in my mind? What I think is the fundamental value that brought me into politics? Is it to facilitate the autonomy of some, or to protect the vulnerability of many? I think that's the choice. Now, somebody could say, well, I did think I came into politics to promote autonomy. Fine. But you have to accept, I think you do have to accept, but it means at the expense of many vulnerable. And this is just another, I think, example of it in terms of the effect of assisted suicide and palliative care. You raised 2 points there about those who are in healthcare workers in palliative care. The statistics are already there. We know that I think it's over 3/4 against assisted suicide. Well, that's one thing. But I think about 40% who work in palliative care, from consultants right out to nurses and others, they say they'll leave the profession. So if that's the case, if it's the case that assisted suicide comes into their hospices, we are facing a 40% loss of medical personnel in palliative care. Now, so we cannot say you can have both equally, because it's a clear, a direct effect. On the funding issue, it's a big concern, isn't it? Because again, I think the statistics show that over the course of someone's life, they live to 60, 70, 80, 90, whatever, 80% of medical expenses in the last 2 years. That's where most of the money of any citizen, most of the expense is the last 2 years of their lives. It's clear that there'll be a great saving. A great saving for us, the NHS, if this is introduced. And so we can't deny that those factors are there. And they've also been expressed by some, albeit maybe who are in the extreme, but some are expressed, this will be a good thing in terms of a resource.
Some have come straight out and said that.
Straight out and said that. And then again, looking around for funding. If I'm concerned about people's well-being at the end of their lives, and I'm in a position to fund it, whether I'm a personal, or whether it's foundation, or whether it's an institutional funding, if I think there's no alternative except that to give someone good palliative care so they can end their life well, I'll fund that. But if I think actually there's a way they don't need to go through this and it's assisted suicide, it might raise questions for me. So in every way you look at this is clear, direct, detrimental effect to the vulnerable and to those who are wanting to end their lives well through palliative care.
So in some respects, the debate at the moment, at least, around assisted suicide is a theoretical one. We haven't got there yet, but it's valid to propose possible outcomes. Coming now to an actual debate, which would be on the beginning of life, the issue of abortion. Earlier this year, at Westminster, MPs voted to debate amendments to the Crime and Policing Bill, which would effectively decriminalise abortion. And just over 2 weeks ago, the Scottish Government accepted a report from a group it had set up, a so-called expert group, on abortion law reform. A year ago, exactly a year ago, in a newspaper column, you predicted that this group would push for effectively decriminalisation, for a massive liberalisation in the regime around abortion. And you also criticised the composition of that group, which was made up of people who were almost exclusively in favour of widening the access and the time limits and reducing any protections. Do you feel vindicated, or do you feel very disappointed? Or both, perhaps?
Probably both, I think, really. But it didn't require a great amount of prophecy to have seen a couple of years ago that this is where this expert abortion group was going to lead, what it was going to recommend. It was called Expert. The reason why it was Expert is that all of the 13 who were part of it were involved in the abortion industry. Their expertise were in facilitating abortion. Their expertise was not in ethics or medical ethics or healthcare ethics. It was really in the provision of abortion facilities. The chair had been a trustee of BPAS, which is the biggest abortion provider in the United Kingdom. And of the 13 members, none of them was pro-life. And none of the pro-life organisations was represented. And so, and as soon as they had begun their discussion, it was supposed to be objective. As soon as they begun, they introduced a non-regression principle, which meant whatever evidence we find, we will ensure a principle that abortion will not be any more restricted than it is. So the bishops wrote to the Health Minister, Jenny Minto, to express our concerns about this. And we also raised them with the First Minister. And our conclusion at the time is that the expert group was undemocratic. It was bound to lead to unjust results, unjust one thing, but also it was discredited before it started because of its membership and because of this non-regression principle. And therefore, whatever recommendations it was going to give were always going to lack legitimacy. So, and what we've found is that extreme proposals from a discredited committee. So, and as you say, what they have recommended is decriminalisation of abortion. Now, that's a word that's used like a lot of the words in these debates. They're used sort of, I think, to dupe the public, because what the public says, do you believe that women should be criminalised? And then you create a circumstance that appeals to people's emotions, and so then you'll get a poll saying, yeah, most people are in favour of decriminalisation. Ask the same question a different way. Do you believe that in this country there should be abortion up to the day before birth for any reason whatsoever? Most people say no. Most people find that really quite unpalatable. But that's what this expert group has proposed: abortion up until birth. Up until birth.
It's also probably worth reminding people that in many ways the UK is an outlier anyway in Europe, where our time limits at the moment at 24 weeks are quite well beyond what most other countries have. And the principle which started, under pinning abortion legislation was viability, which is why that limit was chosen, and we're seeing that increase. All of that's been ignored. The fact that across Europe 14 or 16 weeks are common is completely ignored here. We're already far beyond, and as you say, even then refused to even countenance restricting that but keeping the door open to taking it even further. So we do seem to be on a really, really dangerous and dismal path.
Yes, I think this. I heard someone saying this. If the proposals of this expert commission were enacted in legislation, it would make Scottish abortion legislation among the most extreme in the world. And Scottish people aren't extremists. Right? The Scottish population would not want their abortion legislation to be the most extreme in the world. You have to go through hundreds of countries before you find a place where the unborn child is under so much threat as in Scotland. They're not. But I think what might galvanise this debate, because one of the difficulties is there's so much silence around this debate. There are lots of people who are pro-life, but for some reason they just don't feel as though they can say that they are. And that's not. We need to help people to find a voice. I think what might galvanise it is that when the bishops have said, the Anthony Horan, who's our spokesman, has said this is a extreme and radical proposals. Included in that, why are we saying that? Because included in that is that the committee is also recommending de facto sex selection abortions, because it was put to them that they should limit abortion to sex, at least to sex selection, and they ignored that. Mm-hmm. So now we're in the position of what's likely to happen. It's likely to happen, sadly, given what we know of sex selection abortions, given what we know that abortions will be taking place in Scotland, if this goes through, potentially up to birth, because the fetus is a girl.
It's a girl. So one of the ironies, many ironies there, is that this legislation, proposed anyway, idea is to advance women's rights. And one of the side effects would be you would effectively be wiping out a generation of women.
It's kind of a full circle, isn't it?
Mm. As is another development in the abortion debate, which has been the pills by post regime. It was brought in during COVID when consultations in person weren't possible. And it's hard not to think back to what was said in 1967 when the abortion legislation was being proposed, and one of the cliches was it was to end backstreet abortions. And here we are now with a regime where now the majority of abortions are happening via the pharmaceutical route, using those pills, and they are happening in the back streets. They are happening in homes again, with all the brutal, bloody reality of that. And again, we appear to have come a full circle.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main justifications of the Abortion Act in 1967 was to bring it under medical supervision. That was, I think, that may well have been what got it over the line. And now what we've done is we've put it outside medical supervision.
It's a horrific irony of that. You spoke about changing the debate, advancing the debate. What else can the church do to help inform and also to energise people so that they get involved? Because organisations like SPUC do lobby lawmakers all the time. It's a significant part of the work. But it's true that really the biggest effect on any politician will be what they hear from their constituents in their surgeries and in their mailbag and in their inbox. What can the church do to encourage people to act in order to try and influence their elected representatives?
Yes, I mean, there's tiny signs of hope. I hear that the MSPs have had a bigger mailbag on the recommendations of the expert committee than in any other matter to do with abortion. So I think when we see things are extreme, as we've described them there, it might of itself begin to galvanise people, but we have to continue to raise awareness in the Catholic community. At least that's what we can do at every level. At every level, I think maybe about 40 years ago, We could have said in Scotland to be Catholic was to be pro-life and to be known to be so. So most Catholics would have been known to be pro-life. Sadly, I think that's not the case as it was. And so it requires us to form and educate our people as to the right to life. I mean, for people of faith, we would say that life belongs to God. You know, that we've got all of those passages in the scriptures. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. That Jesus came into the world through the womb of our Blessed Mother Mary. And there's that lovely story at the Visitation where Mary meets Elizabeth, and both of them are influenced by the sons in their womb. Jesus in the womb of the Blessed Mother Mary, John the Baptist in the womb of Elizabeth. And so to be pro-life is part of our faith. Beyond that, I think we're living a very individualistic society and quite a sentimental society where the debate is only ever on what is the human situation of this poor person in a particular situation. And we've entirely forgotten about the common good. You know, what's we've lost in Scotland, I think it was something, 1 million Scottish citizens since the Abortion Act, 1 million Scottish citizens. And if you look at what a lot of debate going around in the country, it's about not having enough young people to pay taxes, not having enough young people to look after the elderly, the inverse demographic triangle now where we've got a very small percentage of our population who are young and a majority who are old. Now, any demographer will tell you that that's unsustainable for a society. And it's also gets exponentially worse. That Scotland needs children for its common good. And so I think we need to be asking the broader, not just what's the situation of the person, but what's the question of the common good. The thing is that we now have tools on the internet which make it so easy to contact your MP or your MSP. You just pull these things up from the various pro-life organisations, and it's a tool that it says, put in your postcode, and you put in your postcode, and it pulls up all of your elected representatives. And if you send one email, you send it in Scotland, you send it to all. And it was also this one particular tool called Write to Them. That is a tool that is monitored by the Scottish Parliament. So in terms of whether MSPs respond to the Write to Them or not, we'll give an indication of, you know, how on the ball and how on the job the MSP is, how responsive the MSP is. So in the past, it was quite difficult. You had to get pen and paper and go and find out where your MSP was, your MP was, and put a stamp on it and take it to the post box and put it in and then wait for a response. It couldn't be easier now to do.
No. And you won't be surprised to know that if you go to spuc.org.uk, you'll also find those tools, making it very, very easy to make contact. Bishop John, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your time with us today, and thank you for answering our questions.
Thank you, Peter. It's always a privilege for me to be helping out in any way that I can in the pro-life cause, and to thank all of them you who are involved in SPUC for the wonderful work you do. It has to be, for me, the number one social justice issue of our times, but it does require a lot of courage, a bravery, faith, perseverance to continue in this work. But I do think in generations to come we'll thank you for what you've done and see you as the heroes of the times.
Thank you.
A report in The Guardian has reported on a leaked Labour policy note that has raised serious new questions about the government's claimed neutrality on assisted suicide. Currently, Kim Leadbeater MP's Terminally Ill Adults End of Life Bill has been spun as a purely backbench initiative, though this recent release has brought that into doubt. According to the document, drafted in November 2023, while Labour was still in opposition, party strategists explicitly discussed introducing assisted suicide via a private member's bill. The supposed attraction was not only that such a route would allow a so-called free vote, but that it would still let ministers exert heavy influence over the final law while avoiding direct ownership of a manifesto commitment. The paper proposed limiting eligibility to mentally competent, terminally ill adults with a prognosis of less than 6 months, a description strikingly similar to the Leadbeater bill now before the Lords. That context matters. The government has repeatedly insisted it is neutral on the substance of assisted suicide, even while providing technical support to ensure the bill is workable, a role it says it must play with private members' bills. But this leak suggests that Labour was thinking through, in advance, how to shape and steer legislation of this kind through the private members' bill process, including by working with advocacy groups and civil servants. If true, the bill looks much less like a spontaneous parliamentary initiative and much more like policy by the back door. Leadbeater's office has flatly denied any prior coordination with Number 10 or the Labour leadership before she took up the issue, and maintains that policy decisions have been hers and Lord Falconer's alone. The leak lands amid mounting procedural controversy in the Lords. More than 1,000 amendments have been tabled, and supporters of assisted suicide have accused opponents of filibustering. The government have therefore given extra sitting days to get the bill through committee stage before the spring 2026 session deadline, adding to the sense that official machinery is being used to keep the legislation alive. SPUC's CEO, John Deegan, commented on the story.
If it's true, it doesn't seem to be at odds with what we've seen. They seem to have bent over backwards to make sure that this gets as much time as possible. It's a very contentious issue, and I really think if you're honest, this should have been in their manifesto to try and push it through this way and not take responsibility for it. We've long known of Keir Starmer's support for assisted suicide, so I think it would have been better for the British public to know his views up front rather than have this forced upon us.
A major test of free speech and conscience rights for pro-life organisations begins this week in Washington, D.C., as the First Choice Women's Resource Centres and other crisis pregnancy centres present their case before the United States Supreme Court. The centres are challenging a subpoena from the New Jersey Attorney General's office that demands extensive donor, staff, and internal records disclosure under a controversial 2023 consumer protection investigation. Pro-life activists view the case as critical, not just for one network, but for the protection of all pregnancy support services. They warn that if the subpoena is enforced, donor confidentiality could be destroyed, support for such centres could collapse, and the state could effectively choke off alternative, life-affirming care. A forced donor registry does not promote transparency. It intimidates and silences, said a First Choice spokesman, according to reports from the Associated Press. Attorneys for First Choice argue the subpoena violates their First Amendment rights to free speech and free association, because the threat of enforcement chills donors and volunteers, deterring them from supporting a controversial cause. Several justices have reportedly expressed concern that the broad nature of the demand could undermine constitutionally protected advocacy. Now, from a pro-life standpoint, the stakes are high. Since the 2022 overturn of nationwide abortion rights under Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organisation, many have turned to crisis pregnancy centres for support, from counselling to maternity planning and practical help. If these centres are muzzled or financially crippled, pregnant women may lose critical alternatives to abortion. Supporters hope the court will side with First Choice, affirming that non-state, faith-based providers can continue offering counselling and support without fear of punitive investigation or forced donor exposure. A ruling is expected by mid-2026, and whichever way it goes, it will send a powerful signal about the future of free conscience and pro-life support in the United States. Religious sisters across the United States have launched a unique pro-life outreach this Advent, sending handwritten Christmas cards to every abortion facility in the country. The initiative, now entering its 5th year, is coordinated by the ministry and Then There Were None, and carried out by contemplative convents who see the effort as a prayerful extension of outreach to those trapped in the abortion industry. Each December, boxes of blank cards are delivered to participating convents. Sisters, many with little contact without the outside world, spend sacred hours of Advent writing messages of prayer, compassion and hope. The cards are addressed to abortion centre staff and clinics, not with threats or condemnation, but with words of encouragement, forgiveness, and an invitation to seek help if they wish to leave their jobs. Before mailing, the cards are placed on the convent altar in front of the Blessed Sacrament, where they remain for prayers. The impact of this quiet pastoral campaign is already being felt. At least one abortion clinic worker has contacted the ministry and quit since receiving a card. Others have described the envelope, handwritten without a return address, as a beautiful, unexpected sign, prompting reflection. From a pro-life viewpoint, the campaign underscores a vital truth. Human dignity and life-affirming outreach offer a real alternative to the abortion industry's anonymity and pressure. Rather than politicking or protest, these sisters choose prayer, compassion, and personal, discreet invitations to a different path. They are reaching out not only to unborn children, but to those who facilitate their destruction, often trapped by circumstance, guilt, or fear. As Christmas approaches, many hope the campaign will expand. They believe every card carries not just ink and paper, but the possibility of transformation for workers, for clinics, and ultimately for society's respect for life. New figures from the Department of Health of Northern Ireland show a continued and steep rise in abortions across the province, a trend deeply troubling and predictable. According to the official Northern Ireland abortion statistics of 2023 to 2024 report, there were 2,792 abortions between the 1st of April 2023 and the 31st of March 2024. This marks a sharp increase from 2,168 abortions in the previous year, a jump of 624 abortions, or 28.8%. Looking back further, the number has risen by nearly 77%, compared with 1,574 abortions in the years 2020 and 2021, the first full year after the 2020 law change. Of particular concern to pro-life groups is the rise in abortions amongst minors. In the years 2023 to 2024, there were 72 abortions involving girls under 18, up from 60 in the years 2022 to 2023. Commenting on the figures, SPUC's Executive Director Michael Robinson said, "These numbers are a tragedy, representing thousands of unborn lives ended each year. The increased figures reflect more than just statistics. They signal a deepening culture that completely devalues unborn human life." As the next election approaches, SPUC hopes the soaring abortion numbers will provoke public debate and a renewal of laws that once valued both woman and child. China has announced that starting in January 2026, contraceptive medicines and devices, including condoms, will be subject to a new 13% value-added tax, ending a 3-decade period in which such items had been exempt. This move comes as part of a broader shift in Beijing's demographic policy amid a dramatic decline in the country's birth rate. In 2024, China recorded only about 9.5 million births, roughly half the number registered in 2016, just after the end of the long-standing one-child era. Under the revised tax law, while contraceptives become more expensive, childcare services such as nurseries and kindergartens, as well as elder care, disability support, and marriage-related services, will see VAT removed. The government says this is part of a package designed to encourage couples to have more children. In addition to the tax changes, authorities are rolling out a catalogue of pro-natalist measures, increased parental leave, cash bonuses for newborns, and new guidance discouraging non-medically necessary abortions. However, experts warn that raising the cost of contraceptives is unlikely to cause a significant uptick in birth rates on its own, as shifting social attitudes continued to deter many young people from starting or expanding families. While the so-called condom tax signals a dramatic reversal from decades of strict population control, whether it or any of the government's other pro-natalist measures will successfully reverse China's demographic decline remains deeply uncertain. And finally, SPUCTV made it into a national newspaper this week when our interview with Sir Brian Souter stirred up controversy. The Daily Record newspaper quoted extensively from Sir Brian's interview, which forced a defensive comment from the chair of the Scottish Government's so-called expert group on abortion reform and from Labour and Green pro-abortion politicians. SPUCTV News extends an open invitation to those politicians and others like them to join us and defend their views and opinions. I'm William Curry, and that was SPUCTV News, bringing to light what others hide.
Back in 1967, when abortion was legalised, politicians and others used fear-mongering that we must legalise abortion in order to prevent backstreet abortions. Unfortunately, nowadays, with DIY abortion pills, having an abortion is glamorised online as a self-care act to simply end the life of your unborn baby within the confines of your own home. Despite this, in the past 5 years, over 50,000 women have been hospitalised from complications with abortion pills, and we are told as women that having an abortion is empowering and progressive. The truth is, it isn't. I'm Catherine Mokler, and this is Viewpoint. For some, the idea of a getaway and romantic breaks have been replaced with renting out Airbnbs or hotels to pop these dangerous abortion pills. Countless videos on TikTok and Instagram have women showcasing their abortion ritual in their own bedrooms or sitting rooms with cosy blankets, candles and takeaways. I have spoken to women who have rented out Airbnbs so that they wouldn't be as traumatised because they've learned from other comments on platforms such as Mumsnet how scarred they were from taking the pills in their own home. If they take the pills elsewhere, they hope it won't remind them as much as if they had taken them at home. Backstreet abortions were happening before the 1967 Act, even though it was legal if it was carried out in order to save the mother's life under the Infant Life Preservation Act 1929. Women who were less well off used various methods to carry out their own abortion. These methods were horrific and often fatal. There were many consequences from this for women, such as sepsis, hemorrhages, and even death. The goal of the 1967 Abortion Act was to change the law so that women could obtain abortions under certain controlled conditions, which we were told would stop backstreet abortions. During the years between 1961 to 1963, the confidential inquiry into maternal deaths in England and Wales revealed 816 maternal deaths, and there were 139 cases of abortion. The inquiry revealed that 77 of the 139 cases were illegal, so illegal abortions were not the main cause of death at 9% of all maternal deaths. There is this lie today that thousands of women died from backstreet abortions in the 60s. They didn't. The reality is that it was far fewer. Both pro-abortion and pro-life campaigners can agree that we don't want women to die or suffer harm. In the past, Parliament was motivated by an abortion ideology and not a public health crisis. The public were sold a lie. Fast forward to 2025, we now have made abortion available on every back street through pills by post. In a 2017 survey, only 1% of participants wanted the time limit to be extended past 24 weeks for abortion, while others also want a reduction in the limit. Polling has revealed that women want restrictions on abortion. It appears that the Parliament of the 1960s did nothing to fix the issues, leading a woman to even consider having a backstreet abortion. Dr. Tanya McIntosh, in her study focusing on the reasons for abortion in Sheffield in 1920 up until 1940, revealed backstreet abortions were happening at high rates due to economic reasons. Although the public were told economic security would make abortion an unknown thing, MPs decided not to prioritise economic security, but instead chose to promote abortion. During the 1960s, abortion was also seen as a remedy by the Abortion Law Reform Association when the thalidomide controversy was happening due to numbers of babies being born with abnormalities caused by the morning sickness drug. Abortion Law Reform Association had members who were also part of the Eugenics Society. No surprise there. Getting rid of backstreet abortion did not lead to greater equality. No amount of bloodshed, especially by taking the lives of unborn children, will equate to liberation. The issues that might lead a woman to consider abortion have not been addressed. The solution to poverty is not to make abortion safer. It should be to make poverty rarer. According to data obtained through Freedom of Information requests by Kevin Duffy, more than 50,000 women have been hospitalised since 2020, following complications from at-home abortions. Kevin, a former senior executive at Marie Stopes International, knows the industry from the inside. His findings confirm what the pro-life movement has long warned, that the pills by post system is reckless, unsafe, and driven more by ideology than by concern for women's welfare. 1 in 17 women who take abortion pills at home ends up in hospital. Behind that statistic lie human stories. Women bleeding in their bathrooms, frightened and alone, unsure what is happening to their bodies. Still, the NHS refuses to release data on the complications experienced by women who have abortions at home. Manipulative language is used by many in the pro-abortion movement, such as "you're in control" within your own home. I remember interviewing Patricia Sandoval regarding her multiple abortions, and she said that with her previous abortion, when the doctor carried it out, that one could say, well, he was the killer. Now with the DIY abortion pills, women are the direct killers of their unborn babies. Women have become complicit in a child-killing industry, not to mention the fact that this is an abuser's dream to be able to coerce women easily to get these pills over the phone without a medical consultation. And we've all seen the countless stories of abusive partners place the pills in their girlfriend's drinks, while others have obtained the pills for them illegally. We've given abusers a license to kill by allowing fatal drugs to be obtained so easily, and we've devalued life and our supposedly civilised society in the process. That's all we have time for this week. If you are enjoying our content, please like, comment and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions or topics we should cover, please email us at the address on the screen or in the description below. Thanks for watching.